Hello everybody, this is Peretz Eichler, and once again we are continuing our conversations with Rabbi Leib Tropper. Our series now is focusing on profiles of greatness, great people in the Jewish world, past and present. Today, Rabbi Tropper is going to be talking about Maran, Harav, Tuvia, Goldstein, Zt'l the Rosh Yeshiva of Emek Halacha. Rabbi Leib, thanks for joining us again, and we're honored to be able to talk to you about these past Gedolim that had so much influence on everybody in Klal Yisrael. What can you tell us about Rabbi Tuvia Goldstein Zt'l?
The unique influence that Rabbi Tuvia Goldstein had with me, particularly because he was my Rabbi for many years, and we lived in the Lower East Side, which is the cradle of American Jewry. He came from Kamenetz. He was born in, obviously, Poland, and he learned by Rabbi Wasserman for many years. And he learned by Rabbi Ber. Then he came to America, and I was in a yeshiva, but there's only one of the only yeshivas in New York, called Yeshivas Rabbeinu Yaakov Yosef, a.k.a. Rabbi Jacob Joseph School. And Rabbi Tuvia, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Tuvia Goldstein, was a Maggid Shir then. He was a Maggid Shir at that point. He wasn't a Rosh Yeshiva of his own. And we got to know him because we davened the Shabbos together with his family and him, and I ended up being very close to his son, Reb Mordechai, and the family. My father with Rav Tuvia Goldstein, Zichr Tzadik L'Bracha, was Zichr Tzadikim L'Bracha. Rav Tuvia, Maran Rav Tuvia, was a very unique posek. From his younger years, I remember speaking to Reb Nachum from the Mir, Maggid Shir, the most popular Maggid Shir in the Mir, told me that even when he was in Branovich, which was shared with him together with from Birnbaum and Reb Nachum and other Gedol Yisrael, who became Gedol Yisrael from Branovich, from Bechonin Yeshiva, he then had a very strong interest in halacha, though it was kind of a yeshiva that he really learned, focused on the lomdis and the conventional yeshiva way of learning. He had a special penchant for halacha. Excuse me. And when he came to New York already, so he was known to be a posek, young man. He gave shiurim for Balabatim, the Balabatim loved his shiurim. He used to give it once a week in RJJ, one of the Mesifta classrooms. RJJ was a yeshiva of 1,200 bachram. In those days, it was a lot of bachram in yeshiva. They had Rabbeim, each one of them could be their own Rosh Yeshiva. So, Reb Tuvia, Zt'l L'Bracha, was the warmest, kindest, sensible, reasonable, a Balmidis that was hard to find somebody similar to that, even somebody within that range of Midas that Tuvia had, and the Yediyas in Halacha, and not only that, he took the Achrayis of being Machriya, making decisions between Machlokes, between this Pesach and that Pesach. He took the Achrayis to make a decision between two Pesachim, which was rare. So, Rav Tuvia Zt'l, I'm just going to focus on a little bit about his midas, the extreme, how we saw Tzelem Elokim and everything. Rav Tuvia started his yeshiva Emek Halacha on 18th Avenue, 50th Street in Bensonhurst. And I was in America just that time. That was just 1970. I was here in America for a short while. And then I met Rav Tuvia, and he urged me to stay, to join his yeshiva, and they were learning halacha l'maisa. He didn't criticize those who didn't learn halacha l'maisa, but he criticized those who didn't also learn halacha l'maisa. That Seder was exclusively learning this lamdis and not knowing the halacha. He quoted many sources, particularly this Meiri and the Likutei Meiri, the Yalkut Meiri that this was printed many years ago, that he quotes in the Haskama that he gave me for one of my halachas farim. He quotes that Meiri how important it is to come lasuke shmaitza aliba delchas, how important it is for one to come to a halacha conclusion, not just sit and kind of focus, concentrate on the maybes and the could be's and the should be's, but what is lamaisa? Bottom line, what is the halacha lamaisa? How could one be? He used to say, how can a person believe in the ani mamin of the Rambam? If you believe in schar v'ainesh, if you believe in reward and punishment, then you have to know how to act. I mean, you have to know. I remember him using a mashal. The yeshiva Zt'l used a mashal. He used to say, they'll tell me a shir on all the most complicated sugis, but if I ask him what bracha to make on a radish, they're lost. They're just confused, and they can make the wrong bracha on a radish. But seems not to be bothered by that they'll make a wrong bracha. It's Chayodom and the Behetev, he talks about the whole what bracha to make it in radish. It's not just bracha. You look at a book and look at the manual. The bracha you make on a radish. There's reasons behind what and why. And the Sheshivas Zt'l of Tuvia, who I was very, very close to. I was Eichler to unique closeness, and I could say that I used to go to his house to eat at sometimes because I lived in the Lower East Side. He would tell us stories about his Rabbi. That was his biggest nachas. His smile just swam all over his face when he would talk about his Rabbi and Rabbi Baruch Ber and Rabbi Chanan. A few things that he told us. Yeshiva. That time yeshiva was very small. In embryonic stages, it was very small. It grew, Baruch Hashem, afterwards. He told us about the importance of being a Baal Midas. How Rabbi Shol Yankov Lubachinsky, who was the Mashgiach in Branovich, the son-in-law of the Alter from the Vardik, how his being a Mashgiach in Branovich symbolized those Midas. They were fixing the building, the Beis Medrash, 50th Street and 18th Avenue. And it was in the heat of the summer. And yeshiva, that time, our dinners came from Mozon caterers. Kosher caterer. Almost every night you could see the Rosh Yeshiva coming with 2 portions in his hand. And you think, what's he carrying it for?
He would bring them himself.
He would go to these non-Jewish construction workers, 2 of them that were in the building, and he would, you must eat, you tell them they have to eat. And then he would bring them 2 cups of orange juice and give them to drink. And it was like watching the Rosh Yeshiva himself in his greatness and yet in his humility at the same time. Because it was humility before God, before Tzelem Alekim, even though it's not a Jew, but he's a Tzelem Alekim, as all the Farshim and Rabbi tells us and other Gedolei Yeshua tell us. It was just wonderful to see that. I can't thank a day enough that I was able to see that part of Tuvia. I remember at a chasana of a Talmud that he was a Talmud of his for many years, and I was also very close to him personally. And normally he's a Masada Kedushin. But a Rav walked in, one of the Goyni Hadar walked in, and Tuvia almost ran out of the chasana. He didn't want to be Masada Kedushin. He refused, and he allowed this guy named Maran, Rav Henkin, to be the Masada Kedushin. The Shiva Zt'l, Harav Tuvia, was Meshamish, Rav Moshe, he was Meshamish as well, but he was Meshamish Rav Henkin, particularly for 2 years in Hilchas Gittin. Henkin was known to be the biggest mumcha in Gittin in America. And Rav Tuvia was Zerchet in Meshamish for 2 years in Gittin. And the way he spoke about Rav Henkin, and the way he spoke about Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe used to call him, and I think it's a true to Rav Moshe, from Rav Moshe, I'm sorry, the end of the Chelik Aleph, it was Moshe about Chanukah, where the Rosh Yeshiva is addressed in with such accolades, with such titles. It was unusual for Moshe at that time. He was very young. He was a confidant of Rav Moshe and of Rav Tuvia, of Rav Henkel Zichat Tzadik Bavracha. When Rav Tuvia would see that a Bach's Chavrusa wasn't there that day, he wouldn't offer him to become his Chavrusa, but he would ask him a kasha, end up discussing and learning with him for an hour or two. You don't want to say like make him feel uncomfortable that if she would go and say, I'm going to be a Charusa now, so it'll be uncomfortable. I'm all nervous, I'll become nervous. So instead of doing that, he did B'chachma. Ask him a kasha, discuss something you're learning. He says, what do you say about this? What do you say about that? He always walked home, came out when Lower East Side, Leib with the escort of Talmidim who would constantly ask him questions to demonstrate how much people loved him. And Simchas Torah, everybody danced him in the middle of the night at like 11:45 when they finished in Hakafas and Yaakov Yosef Yeshiva Medrash. They would dance around Reb Tuvia. Reb Tuvia was a name. Tuvia. They would dance him from Henry Street all the way to FDR Drive. There was some dancing in the street. And then he would give food to eat to everybody who came. He would talk about, like I said, he had a nostalgia for the past. And he was talking about it, a chassan of one of Kol Yaakov Talmidim I met to B'Yeshiva, Zt'l, and he was telling me, he says, Rabbi, when I was in Kamenitz, the Heilige Kodesh V'Torah, Baruch Ber said to me, with us, he said, I think to us is Talmidim, before this year, he started crying. Yeshiva, Rabbi Baruch Ber, what they call him, the Rebbe. He used to say, he used to call Rabbi Baruch Ber the Rebbe. Even Rochana Wasam, they didn't call him Rosh Yeshiva, they called him the Rebbe. The Rebbe, the class, such humility. Anyway, so Rabbi Baruch Ber, all of a sudden broke out crying. What did he say? Talking about the lack of role models that existed, he felt existed in his time. He said, Mela, I was zeichet to see Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, the Poisik of all Poiskim. I was zeichet to see Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin, the fire of all fires when it comes to Torah. What could you say? Baruch was the Kaddish V'Torah. But what he tells them, what could you say? I was zeichet to see great people. But what could you say? Let me tell you about Rabbi Baruch Ber's midas, even though this is not about Rabbi Baruch Ber. Rabbi Baruch Ber came to visit with somebody. This is so different than today. I'm sure it's different than today. Person. If you disagree that it's different than today, please tell me. Rabbi Baruch Ber went to visit someone to raise money for the yeshiva. He was Kamenitz, and he was on the east side raising money. And he came towards the door. He heard music playing. It wasn't from music. It wasn't a vision tznigan. It wasn't a mozart tznigan. It was something that perhaps, shouldn't be playing. So when Baruch knocked on the door, who is it? So he takes a peek in the peek hole, whatever. Look, he opened the door a little bit. Then he saw Baruch Ben. He tells his wife, hints to his wife to shut the radio. It's Baruch Ben is coming into the house. So Baruch Ber's plan was to ask him fellow for money. So instead of asking him for money, Baruch Ber gave him a whole lecture. How do you have the chutzpah to take something away from your wife that she enjoys? How do you have a chutzpah? Okay, so the music is not the best music, but she enjoys it. Okay, don't listen, go somewhere else, go out of the house. But how do you have a chutzpah to do that, take away from your wife? This is what he told us the mice, and I was so flabbergasted because I don't think, Peretz, I'm not sure, but I don't think that would happen today. I don't think, the door is great. We don't have any people listening to that kind of music, perhaps. But if it would happen, that someone listened to that music, I don't think it would be even a havamina of a person allowing his wife to keep the music, keep it, tell him to shut it off, and that's the end of the story. But Baruch Ber didn't have that kind of, response. He used to tell us that Baruch Ber would say over a svara from Tuvia Goldstein, Maran would say over a svara from Rabbi Chaim, from Baruch Ber's Rabbi was Rabbi Chaim Alevi Soloveitchik. So he would say it was Svara for Reb Chaim, and he would remember so much the Svara, but he remembered also the way Reb Chaim said the Svara. And he was makbid, Reb Baruch was makbid to say the Svara in the exact way. He would say, the Rebbe had gesagt, as da, and he would change it. Nein, nicht das sei. Da, he'd move the exact hands the exact same way that Reb Chaim would do that. That's how much him, the Rebbe, was so Kodesh V'Tor, and everything he did was Kodesh V'Tor. It really sounds, I know it sounds wickedly stupid in our generation. People, he did this, he did that. What kind of foolishness, what kind of kindishkeit is that? But that's how dovuk he was in his Rebbe. If you see the titles that he writes about the Brisker Rov, or his father, Reb Chaim, you can see how dovuk he was, how attached he was to his Rebbe. We don't have Talmidim like that. We don't have Rabbeim like that. And Al Kapanim, Rav Tuvia would give every Sunday, Maran Rav Tuvia would give every Sunday a shir for Balabatim included, and for Yeshiva like to come on here, halacha shir on a topic. I remember the first shir he gave was on Tfilas Kalim. First shir, and he gave a beautiful shir. People can leave for hours after the shir was over. They were tumbling and learning. The Eshat Torah was flying. The fire of Torah was just kind of, like they say in the Hebrew world, it was koching, it was boiling. It was really coming to the boiling point of the highest level when you see that.
This was a diverse group of younger light, Yeshiva Bakram and Balabatim?
From different yeshivas, because they announced that Tuvia Goldstein was known as a Paisik, as I mentioned, and they're giving a shir on Sunday. And it was all on Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock, remember 2 o'clock, I'm not sure, 3 o'clock, and he gave the shir for about an hour, sometimes a little longer, and it was just something spectacular.
What language did he give it?
He gave him, my Rabbi of Tuvia gave his shir in Yiddish all the time. Once in a while he would stick in English, Yiddishized English word. It was so adorable when he would do that. Just you have to either laugh or you have to smile or be so excited that he was talking to you. When he did that, he felt like he was talking to you, like he knew who you were. The Shiva knew everybody by his name. He didn't really have, only a few people that he called by the first name, but he didn't really call people by the first name for the most part. I remember when the Shivas at Zt'l came to me about a certain young man, and he was upset with me that I didn't tell him that this young man was getting married, did not have any money. He was upset with me. He says, "Do you care about your chava? You gave me all the shmuz about Abbas Chaverim. Do you care about your chava?" So I didn't have to have a lecture from Rambam, Musa Sefer. I heard just Rosh Yeshiva yelling at me about Abbas Chaverim. How can I not tell him this person needs something? And he was repeating it over and over again that I knew already what Abbas Chaverim is supposed to be. I'm not saying I perfected it in the Abbas Chaverim, but I knew what it's supposed to be like. So she was covered for Rav Moshe. So she was covered for Rav Henkin. And the Shiva of Rav Moshe was in Lakewood. The Hespedim for the Shiva of Rav Moshe was in Lakewood Yeshiva. So Rav Tuvia, as a close, call him a Talmud, Chaver, Talmud, whatever they want to call Rav Tuvia to Rav Moshe, that's all. So he got up, he spoke with Rav Moshe, and he said, Pnei Yeshua has a story about him. He didn't want the people to maspid him. The Gemara has a suffix in Sanhedrin whether Hespedim are the covet of the Nifter or the covet of the Chayim, that you're giving the Cyrus for the Nifter. You give the Shechta, you give the Chayim. That's the Gemara has a suffix. So a member of Tuvia said like this, he says, that's by on the day of Avelus, on the day of the Petira, everybody has to agree that it's Yikvid the Chai, Yikvid the Shechvi. It's the honor of the dead, the Nifter. But after the day of Avelus, the first day, and the Shiva and the Shloshim, that's Yikra the Chai. That's the covered honor of everyone else, all the people. And for that, even if he says Al Taspiduni, it says I command not to listen to, not to be maspid me. I'm going to listen to him because it's not for his honor. When in the first day, if he says don't maspid me, because the whole Inyan of Hesped is the covet of the Nifter, so he can be makbid not to do it. But On the 7th day or the Shloshim, even if he says, it's impossible. Rosh Hashiva, to my memory and to my personal sensitivity, was never trying to create a derech and learning for him. He wanted to create a consciousness of halacha, and everybody learns lefi darkei. Lefi darkei, they would learn the halacha, but he would not learn halacha just the Mishnah Berurah. And halacha was from the Gemara and the Rishonim and the Nachronim, and it was amazing how he would, every time he would say a svara, and he would say, so, tell me, so from this is mashma, that from A is mashma B, right? And we say yes. He says, no, how can we pass like C? He would say that, and it was very fascinating to watch him do that. And he did it all the time. I mean, like almost every shia. What happened? There are many, many more stories I could share with you regarding owner of Tuvia. Unfortunately, I was not at Yisrael at the time of the Lavaya, where he was being nispat by many people, particularly his son, a goiner of Mordechai Goldstein, who was himself, in his younger years, he was just always known to be an exceptional Bal Kisher and a very, very super intelligent Talmud Chacham. Younger years, Tuvia was able to have such a son who wrote a sefer on Masechtas Eruvin B'Yayin Har. He was probably his Talmud Muvak, in terms of, because now he's Oiseh Kulei Halacha, though he learned in the Mir Yeshiva here, he's Oiseh Kulei Halacha, and he's just a huge Talmud Chacham. I know Rabbi Yashiv had told me particularly that he's a very chashiv very chashiv about halacha and Meirah. And I said to you before, I wanted to focus some of his midas, and how he'd walk on the floor sometimes and see a piece of dirt on the floor, paper on the floor, that Beis Medrash, right outside the Beis Medrash, and he'd pick it up. He wouldn't even tell a person to go do something for him. It was not even shayach to go and ask him to think that it wasn't even a question. He just push it, pick it up. He would go places to Masada Kedushin just because as a chesed, the person didn't have somebody in Masada Kedushin. He would go to Masada Kedushin, just a chesed. It was a chesed. His time was precious. He shared with me an interesting story. I think you hear with the whole yeshiva. I'm not sure, but I think you hear with me an interesting story. Somebody who was is infamous in a sense in the frum world, not famous but infamous, Chaim Nachman Bialik. He was a poet, and he was learned the Volozhin, but he turned out not to be frum, wrote a poem called Hamasmid. It's a poem that I read, not knowing at the time anything about, I knew by Gali, I didn't know also Mutter, but he told me that somebody asked Rav Moshe Zt'l. Moshe told him, somebody asked him whether or not he's allowed to read the poem Hamasmid because he gets his oiris from that poem. Anybody who read the poem could see this oiris. It's like out of this world, that poem. Moshe was matter to do that. Moshe's koyach to Torah and recognizing this bocha would have a gewaldige chizuk from it, though the poem was an apocryphis. The poem was nostalgia about Nachman Bialik's days in Volozhin and how he kind of held precious and dear the ruach of the Beis Medrash. He started saying Amar Rava, he remembers the singing of the Beis Medrash, Amar Rava, Amar Rabbi, and how that brings him back this chill, but yet a warm chill of Torah involvement and Dveikus and Torah and the Rebbeinu Shalom, and nothing was comparable to that at all in his life. I do want to have time to share more with this profile, because this profile is beyond any particular description. The runner of Tuvia Goldstein will remain someone who is literally missed. It's felt. His absence is felt. It's a presence of absence of Reb Tuvia. Zecher Tzadik Levracha. He should be a schus for all of us. And he should be he should be mispal for his Talmidim. He should be a schus for his Talmidim.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just one question: the ksavim that he left behind, or there is forum today that he authored that we would be able to get access to and perhaps gain even further insight into.
I'm sorry I didn't mention he has 2 volumes of Emek Halacha. I don't know Chuvas Emek Halacha, named after his yeshiva. I don't know if there are anyone more planned to be printed, but there are different Torahs spread out in different places from the Rosh Yeshiva, and I took notes of different Chumash Shiurim that he gave that were also just literally Chidushim. They were Chidushim in Midis. They were not just Chidushim in just Stam. Things from his Rabbeim, from Maran, things he heard from other Gedol Yisrael that he was told or he heard. Things he heard from Moshe. It was just, what can I say? I mean, there aren't that many things on Chumash or anything like that, but on Halacha Bachim, there are 2 krochim, 2 volumes. Chuvas Emek Halacha. I think it's available actually on the second printing.
Rabbi Leib Tropper, thank you once again for giving us this great insight, and hopefully in this continuing series, Bez Hashem, of Profiles in Greatness.
Thank you.